"I'm too old for this," she whispered. Yet the young cowboy stayed the night. The gunshot shattered the evening silence before Martha could even reach for her rifle. She hit the porch floor hard, splinters digging into her palms as another bullet tore through the wooden railing above her head. 47 years old, and she was diving for cover like some greenhorn caught in a range war. The young cowboy appeared from nowhere, vaulting over her fence with his revolver already drawn. He couldn't have been more than 25, dust-covered and wild-eyed, but his hands were steady as he returned fire toward the ridge. 3 shots, precise and calculated, then he was dragging her behind the water trough. "Stay down, ma'am," he said, reloading with practiced speed. Martha wanted to tell him she'd been handling trouble since before he was born, but another volley of gunfire made her swallow the words. She counted at least 4 shooters up in those rocks, and they had the high ground. This wasn't random violence. Someone wanted her dead. "They followed me here," the young man said, guilt thick in his voice. "I'm sorry. I thought I'd lost them at the river." "Who are you?" Martha demanded, grabbing her Winchester from where it had fallen. "Name's Cole Bennett. I was riding through when they started chasing me. Didn't mean to bring this to your doorstep." The shooting paused. Martha knew that silence. They were repositioning, getting ready for a final push. Her ranch sat isolated, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor. No one would hear this fight. Cole was bleeding from his shoulder, she noticed. Fresh blood, soaking through his shirt. He'd been running for a while. "How many are there?" she asked. 6 when they started. I dropped 2 back at Eagle Pass. 4 then? Maybe 3 if you hit 1 just now?" Martha checked her ammunition. "Not enough for a prolonged fight. They want you dead that badly?" "I saw something I shouldn't have. Stagecoach robbery outside Prescott. They killed the driver and 2 passengers. I was hunting nearby, saw the whole thing. And you can identify them. Every last one." Another bullet cracked against the trough. Water began leaking from the fresh hole, pooling in the dirt. They'd have to move soon or be sitting ducks. Martha made a decision she knew she'd probably regret. Barn. 20 yards. "On 3 we run." Cole looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was. At her age, she should be rocking on that porch, not running through gunfire with some fool kid who'd brought killers to her home. 1, she counted. He shifted, ready to move. 2. The shooting started again, concentrated on the trough. 3. They ran. Martha's niece screamed in protest, her lungs burning as bullets kicked up dirt around their feet. Cole fired backward, giving them cover. The barn door loomed ahead, and Martha hit it at full speed. Tumbling inside was Cole right behind her. He slammed the door shut, and in the sudden darkness Martha realized something. She was bleeding, too. Cole struck a match, and the small flame revealed a gash across her forearm, deep enough to worry about. "You're hit," he said, already tearing fabric from his own shirt despite his shoulder wound. "It's nothing," Martha lied, but she let him wrap it anyway. Outside, voices called to each other. The killers were regrouping, surrounding the barn. She'd lived on this property for 15 years, ever since her husband died. Never thought it would become her tomb. "There's a root cellar," she said, pointing to the corner where hay bales concealed a trap door. "We can wait them out down there." "They'll burn us out," Cole replied. "Men like that don't have patience." He was right. Martha could already smell kerosene. They were dousing the walls, preparing to turn the barn into an inferno. She thought of her 2 horses in the back stalls, her milk cow, all the animals that would die because she'd chosen the wrong night to be charitable to a stranger. "The horses," she said. Cole understood immediately. He moved to the stalls, opening them quickly. "Go on, get out." The animals needed no encouragement. They bolted through the barn's back door, crashing into the night. Shouts of surprise told Martha the killers hadn't expected that. "That bought us 30 seconds, Cole said. "What's the play?" Martha was thinking fast. The barn connected to her tool shed through a crawl space her late husband had built for winter access. Only wide enough for 1 person at a time, but it would get them out unseen. "Follow me," she commanded. They crawled through dust and darkness, Martha's arm throbbing with each movement. Behind them, the barn exploded into flames. The heat chased them through the crawl space, singeing Martha's hair as she emerged into the shed. Cole came through coughing, his face blackened with soot. The tool shed had 1 window facing east, away from where the killers had positioned themselves. Martha broke it with the butt of her rifle. "Can you ride bareback?" she asked. "Born doing it," Cole answered. Her horses had scattered but wouldn't go far. Martha whistled low, the same call she'd used for years. Within moments, her mare appeared from the shadows, eyes white with fear but trained enough to respond. Cole caught her bridle while Martha whistled again for the gelding. The second horse came slower, spooked by the fire and gunshots. Cole had to grab its mane and swing up before it bolted again. Martha pulled herself onto the mare, her body protesting every movement. Too old for this. The thought came unbidden, but she shoved it away. "Where's the nearest law?" Cole asked, bringing his horse alongside.
"Sheriff's in Copper Creek, 12 miles northeast." Martha paused.
"But there's something closer. My neighbor Frank Morrison. He's a former Texas Ranger. 6 miles due east. Then we ride east." They kicked their horses into a gallop just as the killers realized their prey had escaped. Bullets whined through the air, but Martha and Cole were already swallowed by darkness, racing across open ground, with only starlight to guide them. The land here was treacherous at night. Prairie dog holes could snap a horse's leg, hidden gullies could send rider and mount tumbling. But Martha knew every inch of this terrain. She'd ridden it in all conditions, memorized every rock and rise. She led them on a winding path that avoided the worst dangers while putting distance between them and their pursuers. Cole kept pace, proving himself a capable horseman. Blood still seeped from his shoulder, leaving a dark trail down his arm, but he never wavered in the saddle. Behind them, the orange glow of her burning barn lit the horizon. 15 years of memories turning to ash. "I'm sorry," Cole said again, reading her thoughts. "Save it," Martha replied. "You didn't start that fire. They did. And when we get help, we're going to make sure they answer for it." The horses' hooves thundered across the hardpan, eating up miles. Martha could hear a pursuit behind them. At least 3 riders, maybe 4, but they didn't know the land like she did. She led Cole through a narrow canyon that would force their pursuers to single file, slowing them down considerably. On the other side, the terrain opened into rolling hills. Frank Morrison's ranch should be visible from the next rise. Martha's mare was lathering, foam flying from her mouth with each stride. The gelding Cole rode was faring no better. They couldn't maintain this pace much longer. "There!" Cole shouted, pointing ahead. Lights. A ranch house with lamps burning in the windows. Frank was still awake, probably reading those dime novels he loved. Martha urged her mare towards salvation, every muscle in her body screaming. They crashed into Frank's yard like demons from hell, both horses nearly collapsing. Martha hit the ground and immediately started pounding on the door. Frank Morrison, open up!" The door swung wide. Frank stood there in his nightshirt, gray-haired but still broad-shouldered, a shotgun in his hands. His eyes took in the blood, the terror, the fire glow in the distance. "How many?" he asked simply. 4, maybe 3, Martha gasped. "They're right behind us." Frank didn't hesitate. "Get inside." Barred the door behind me. He grabbed his gun belt from a peg, strapped it on over his nightshirt, and walked out into the yard like he was going to check the weather. Martha pulled Cole inside and slammed the heavy oak door. Through the window, she watched Frank position himself behind the water well, his shotgun resting casually across the stone rim. The old ranger looked almost bored, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. The riders came hard and fast, not expecting resistance. Frank let them get close, real close, before he stood up and fired both barrels into the air. The massive boom froze them in their tracks. "That's far enough, boys," Frank called out, his voice carrying easy across the yard. "You're on private property, and I don't recall sending invitations." The lead rider pulled up his horse. Even in the dim light, Martha could see the calculation in his posture. He was weighing his options, trying to decide if one old man in a nightshirt was worth the trouble. "We're chasing fugitives," the man said. "They rode onto your land. We got a right to pursue." "Show me your badge," Frank replied calmly, already reloading his shotgun. Silence. Martha held her breath. "Didn't think so," Frank continued. "Now I spent 20 years as a Texas Ranger, and I know the law. You boys got no authority here. So you can turn around and ride back where you came from, or I can start shooting for real. Your choice, but make it quick. My coffee's getting cold." One of the riders reached for his gun. Frank's shotgun swung toward him faster than a snake strike. "Boy, I wouldn't. I may be old, but I can still put both barrels through a silver dollar at this distance. You feeling lucky?" The man's hand stopped midway to his holster. Martha saw movement to the left. A 4th rider, trying to circle around through the darkness. She grabbed her Winchester and smashed the window glass with the barrel. "Frank, left flank!" Frank spun and fired in one smooth motion. The sneaking rider's horse reared and bolted, throwing its rider hard into the dirt. The man didn't get up. "Last warning, gentlemen," Frank said, still unnaturally calm. "Light out or join your friend in the dirt." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the lead rider cursed and wheeled his horse around. The others followed, leaving their fallen companion behind. They disappeared into the night, but Martha knew they weren't gone for good. Men like that didn't quit easy. Frank walked over to the downed rider, keeping his shotgun trained on the man. After a minute, he called back to the house. "He's alive. Somebody bring me some rope." Cole found rope in Frank's kitchen and brought it out. Together they tied the unconscious man's hands and feet while Frank kept watch on the darkness. When they were finished, Frank finally seemed to relax. "Now then," he said, looking at Martha and Cole properly for the first time. "Somebody want to tell me what in blazes is going on?" Inside, with fresh coffee and bandages, Cole told the story. The stagecoach robbery, the murders, his flight across 3 counties with killers on his trail. Frank listened without interrupting, his weathered face giving nothing away. "You saw their faces?" Frank asked when Cole finished. "Clear as day. All 6 of them." 6. "We dropped 2, maybe 3 if the one outside don't make it. That leaves 3 still hunting you." Frank rubbed his jaw. "We need to get you to a judge, get your testimony on record. Once that's done, they got no reason to kill you. Damage would already be done. Nearest judge is in Prescott," Martha said. "That's where the robbery happened. 40 miles west." "We'll never make it," Cole said quietly. "They'll be waiting on every road between here and there." Frank stood and walked to a cabinet. He pulled out a detailed map of the territory and spread it on his table. His finger traced several routes, considering and discarding each one. "There's an old mining trail through the Black Rock Mountains," he said finally. "Nobody uses it anymore since the silver played out. Rough going. Takes twice as long, but they won't expect it." "I can't ask you to do this," Cole protested. "You've already risked enough." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering." Frank looked at Martha. "You in?" Martha knew she should say no. She should stay here, try to salvage what remained of her ranch, let the younger men handle this fight. But the memory of her barn burning, her home violated, made the decision easy. "I'm in," she said. They left before dawn, 3 riders on fresh horses heading into mountains most folks had forgotten existed. Frank led them on switchback trails barely wide enough for a single horse, through pine forests so thick the sun couldn't penetrate. The bound outlaw they'd left tied to a tree near the main road with a note pinned to his shirt explaining what he'd done. By midday, they'd climbed high enough to see the valley spread below them. Martha could just make out the smoke still rising from her property, a dark smudge against the brown landscape. Everything she owned, gone. "You thinking about going back?" Cole asked, riding alongside her. "Thinking about what I'll do when this is over," Martha replied. "I built that place with my husband. Raised cattle there, survived droughts and harsh winters. Some murdering thieves aren't going to take it from me." Cole smiled. "You're tougher than most men I know." "Age will do that," Martha said. "You survive enough years, you learn what matters and what doesn't. Pride doesn't matter. Revenge doesn't matter. But justice? That matters. Making sure men like them can't hurt anyone else? That matters plenty." They rode in silence for a while, Frank leading them ever higher into the mountains. The air grew thin and cold, and Martha's wounds ached with each movement. But she kept riding, kept pushing forward, because stopping meant dying, and she wasn't ready for that yet. The ambush came at a narrow pass where the trail squeezed between 2 massive boulders. Frank's horse went down first, shot through the neck. The old ranger rolled clear as the animal collapsed, coming up with both pistols drawn. Martha and Cole dove from their saddles as gunfire erupted from the rocks above. "How did they find us?" Cole shouted, pressing himself flat against a boulder. "Doesn't matter now," Frank replied, firing upward. "We gotta move or we're dead." Martha counted muzzle flashes. 2 shooters, maybe 3, positioned in the rocks above the pass. They had perfect cover and clear lines of fire. Anyone trying to ride through would be cut down instantly. "The old mine shaft," Frank said, pointing to a dark opening in the cliff face about 30 yards to their left. "We make it there, we got a chance." "That's a long 30 yards, Martha observed, bullets striking sparks off the rocks around them. "Got a better idea?" She didn't. Martha checked her rifle, counted her remaining ammunition, and made peace with whatever came next. "On your signal." Frank waited for a pause in the shooting, then fired both pistols rapidly upward, forcing the ambushers to take cover. Now they ran. Martha's legs pumped despite the pain, despite her age, despite everything. Cole ran beside her, firing his revolver backward to keep the shooters' heads down. Bullets chased them across the open ground, kicking up dirt and stone fragments. The mine entrance yawned ahead like a mouth. Martha dove through it, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Cole tumbled in after her, and Frank came last, still firing as he backed into the darkness. "Everybody alive?" Frank asked. "More or less," Cole answered, breathing hard. Martha coughed and sat up. The mine shaft extended deep into the mountain, supported by rotting timbers that looked ready to collapse at any moment. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, and the air smelled of minerals and decay. "They'll come in after us," she said. "Let them try," Frank replied. "This tunnel splits 3 ways about 50 feet back. I worked these mines 20 years ago. They don't know the layout. We do." Outside, voices called to each other. The killers were regrouping, planning their assault. Martha recognized one voice from earlier, the leader who'd spoken to Frank at the ranch. He sounded angry now, frustrated by their continued survival. "Split up," Frank whispered. "Take different tunnels, circle around, come at him from behind. It's the only way." "I'm too old for crawling through abandoned mines," Martha said, but she was already moving. The left tunnel was barely tall enough to crouch in. Martha moved through it by feel, one hand on the rough stone wall, the other holding her rifle. Behind her, she could hear the killers entering the main shaft, their boots scraping on stone. The tunnel branched again. Martha took the right fork, gambling that it would loop back toward the entrance. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyes like a physical weight. She'd never been afraid of the dark before, but down here, buried under tons of rock with killers hunting her, fear crept into her bones. A light flickered ahead. Martha froze, pressing herself against the wall. Footsteps approached, and a man came around the corner holding a lantern. He was young, maybe Cole's age, with a cruel mouth and dead eyes. He never sought her. Martha swung her rifle like a club, catching him across the temple. He went down without a sound, the lantern rolling away and nearly extinguishing. She caught it before it went out, then tied the unconscious man with his own belt. The light helped enormously. Martha moved faster now, following the tunnel as it curved back toward the entrance. Somewhere in the darkness, gunshots echoed. Frank or Cole had found targets. She hurried, hoping they were still alive. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where ancient mining equipment lay rusted and forgotten. 2 men crouched near the far exit, their backs to her, watching the main entrance, waiting for their prey to emerge. Martha set down the lantern and raised her rifle. "Don't move, boys." They moved anyway. The nearest one spun with his gun coming up. Martha fired, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. He fell backward, clutching his leg. The second man got one shot off before Frank appeared from another tunnel and put him down with a pistol round. 2 left, Frank said, reloading. The leader and 1 more. Cole emerged from a third tunnel, blood on his face, but walking steady. "Make that one." I dealt with the other in the east shaft. Silence fell over the mine. Somewhere in the darkness the last killer was hiding, waiting for an opportunity. Martha felt the weight of exhaustion settling over her. Every muscle screamed. Her arm throbbed where she'd been shot. She wanted nothing more than to lie down and rest. "Come out," Frank called into the shadows. "Your men are dead or captured. You're alone. Give up and you'll live to see trial." A laugh echoed through the tunnels, harsh and bitter. "Hang for a stagecoach robbery? I'd rather die right here." "That can be arranged," Frank replied. The shooting started again, wild and desperate. The remaining killer was moving through the tunnels, firing at sounds and shadows. Frank motioned for Martha and Cole to spread out, to surround the man. Martha circled left, moving as quietly as her tired body allowed. She could hear the killer getting closer, his breathing ragged with fear and rage. He rounded a corner and came face to face with her raised rifle. "It's over," Martha said softly. His gun was already pointing at her chest. For a frozen moment, they stared at each other across the darkness. Martha saw the calculation in his eyes, saw him weighing whether he could pull the trigger before she did. She'd faced down rattlesnakes with more conscience than this man possessed. "Drop it," she said again, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. He smiled instead, a terrible expression that told her he'd already made his choice. His finger tightened on the trigger. Cole's shot came from behind him, striking the man's gun hand. The weapon clattered to the ground as the killer screamed and clutched his shattered fingers. Before he could recover, Frank was there, pressing a pistol to his head. "Move and you're dead," Frank said simply. The man sagged, defeated. They bound him with rope and dragged him out into the daylight. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and red. Martha breathed the fresh air like it was salvation itself. I camped that night near the mine entrance, taking turns on watch. The captured killer sat tied to a tree, silent and sullen. His wounded companions from inside the mine would be picked up by the law later. if they survived the night. Martha couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, staring at the flames and thinking about everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been rocking on her porch watching the sunset over her ranch. Now her barn was ashes, her home likely ransacked, and she was camped in the mountains with a young cowboy and an old ranger, guarding a murderer. "You should rest," Cole said, sitting down beside her. His shoulder was properly bandaged now, and the bleeding had stopped. "We got a long ride tomorrow." "I'm too old for this," Martha said quietly. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Cole was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You saved my life 3 times today. Once at your ranch, once at Frank's place, and once in that mine. Seems to me you're exactly the right age for this. Flattery won't make my bones ache less." "It's not flattery. It's truth." Cole poked at the fire with a stick. "I've ridden with a lot of men, Miss Martha, most of them half your age and twice as arrogant. But I never saw anyone handle themselves the way you did today. You didn't panic. You didn't quit, you just kept moving forward. What choice did I have? There's always a choice. You could have turned me away at your porch. Could have told me to handle my own problems. Could have stayed behind when Frank offered to help. But you didn't. You chose to fight." Martha considered this. "My husband used to say that living is just making one choice after another until you run out of choices. I suppose I'm not out yet." Frank joined them by the fire, leaving the prisoner under watch. "We'll reach Prescott by tomorrow evening if we start early. Judge Henderson's a fair man. He'll listen to Cole's testimony, put out warrants for anyone involved who he didn't catch. This thing will be finished." "And then what?" Martha asked. "Then you rebuild," Frank said simply. "You go home and you rebuild what they burned down, same as you did 15 years ago when your husband passed. I was younger then. So what? You're alive now. That's what matters." Martha looked at these 2 men who'd fought beside her, risked their lives for a cause that wasn't even theirs. Frank could have turned them away. Cole could have ridden past her ranch instead of stopping to warn her. But they both chosen differently. "Thank you," she said. "Both of you. For everything." "Thank us when we get you home safe," Frank replied. They reached Prescott late the following day, riding into town as the sun dipped below the horizon. Judge Henderson was holding court in his private office, and Frank's reputation as a former ranger got them immediate access. Cole told his story while the judge listened, occasionally asking questions. When it was finished, Judge Henderson signed the warrants and called for the marshal. "We'll have men out searching for the remaining suspects by morning," he promised. "And Mr. Bennett, you'll need to stay in town until the trial. We have a boarding house that can keep you safe." "I'll stay with him," Frank said. "Make sure nobody tries anything foolish." The judge nodded approval. Then he looked at Martha. "Mrs. Crawford, I'm sorry for what happened to your property. The county will provide compensation for the damages once we've settled this matter." "I appreciate that, Judge. But right now I just want to go home." "I'll escort her," Cole offered immediately. Martha started to protest, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't asking out of obligation. He genuinely wanted to help. They rode out at dawn, just the 2 of them, following the trail back toward her ranch. The journey took most of the day, and they spent it talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his family back in Kansas, his dreams of saving enough money to buy his own land. Martha told him about her years ranching, the good times and the hard ones. When they finally saw her ranch in the distance, Martha's heart sank. The barn was gone completely, just a black scar on the ground. The house had been ransacked, furniture broken, windows shattered. It looked like a war had been fought there. "I'll help you fix it," Cole said quietly, "if you'll let me stay." Martha looked at this young man who'd brought chaos into her life and then fought beside her through hell itself. She thought about the long rebuilding ahead, the hard work, the uncertain future. "I'm too old for this," she whispered. Cole smiled. "Maybe, but I'm not, and I'm not going anywhere." Martha smiled back, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "All right then," she said. "Let's get started." They dismounted and walked toward the broken house together, ready to begin again.